and gentlemen, I am Marife Zamora, your MC and moderator for today's Management Association of the Philippines Arts and Culture Lecture on Investing in Art and Rare Collectibles, The View from the Auction Room, featuring Mr. Ramon Richie E.S. Lerma, co-founder, chair, and chief specialist of Salcedo Auctions. This is a project of the MAP Arts and Culture Committee. Please settle down comfortably. We will now begin our program. On behalf of the MAP Arts and Culture Committee, I would like to start this fifth of the first ever monthly MAP Arts and Culture lecture series. May I now call? Eddie Yap is right now in Canada. He is the chair of the MAP Arts and Culture Committee, and he apologizes for not being able to join us. Again, good afternoon, fellow MAP members and guests. It's a pleasure to be with all of you in this time of the pandemic. I hope you and your family members are well and safe. This pandemic lockdown has caused so much disruption to our lives, aside from so much stress and to some, the loss of family members and friends. It is for this reason that we in the MAP Arts and Culture Committee has been offering a different diet, a diversion, so to speak, from the relatively dreary news and the so many webinars on heavy and serious subjects. Late last year, we offered a series consisting of 3 concerts, which were part of past productions that Eddie Yap did for the MAP. This year, the MAP Arts and Culture Committee, which Eddie Yap chairs, has started a lecture series on arts and culture topics. The topics so far are the Philippine Contemporary, to scale the past and the possible, which was a virtual tour of the Metropolitan Museum of Manila. We also had Pampango High Cuisine with Chef Jean Gonzalez. The third one was Original Filipino Music, or OPM, lecture and demonstration featuring Professor Felipe June M. De Leon Jr. And last month, we had a virtual tour of the National Museum. Today's topic, and the fifth of the series, is Investing in Art and Rare Collectibles, The View from the Auction Room. The next season will be a lecture on heritage and ancestral homes, which will be on the 18th of August. So please watch out for our announcements. Again, thank you everyone and enjoy the lecture. Some reminders before we proceed with the lecture. As participants, you are automatically muted and your camera or video is also off. You may submit your questions through the Q&A box that you see on your screen. And with the assistance of our MAP Secretariat, I will read the questions on your behalf. You will only be able to see the speaker, but you will not be able to view the other participants. In line with the MAP policy and in the interest of time, we will dispense with the lengthy introduction of the speaker. At this point, may I now call on our speaker, the co-founder, chair, and chief specialist of Salcedo Auctions, for his presentation. Please welcome Mr. Ramon Richie E.S. Lerma.
Distinguished members of the Management Association of the Philippines, in particular former chair and member of the MAP Arts and Culture Committee, Ms. Marife Zamora. Greetings, and thank you for inviting me to be your guest speaker. The heartening response to this lecture shown by your presence here this afternoon shows the keen interest that you all have in learning more about the art market and the way it works. I hope to help you in somehow lifting the cloak of mystery, enveloping the fascinating world where objects made out of paint, canvas, wood, paper, or sometimes even scraps of metal or found objects are transformed into objects of beauty that command such astonishing prices, with the promise of returns in many cases, rivaling even stock money market or property placements. In this day and age, when most of us are struggling to find where to put our hard earned cash, most of us would turn to acquiring assets such as property, mutual funds, bonds, or more complex financial instruments. Let me begin by sharing my screen. The title of this talk, as Marife graciously mentioned earlier, Investing in Art and Rare Collectibles. Let me first turn to the series of images for inspiration, which brings us to the onus of this entire presentation. First, let's enjoy the sight of this gorgeous work that is currently on show as part of the Cincinnati Art Museum exhibition, Paintings, Politics, and the Monuments Men. This is Sandro Botticelli's The Ideal Portrait of a Lady, a work in tempera on wood panel. Next.
If you destroy an entire generation of people's culture, it's as if they never existed.
That very short clip from a movie that many of us might have mentioned includes a very important line that I'd like for all of us to remember. The idea whereby our very existence as a people is dependent upon the cultural artifacts that we leave behind. This movie, entitled Monuments Men, is about art experts, museum curators, and others who volunteered to hunt down artworks confiscated by the Nazis in World War II and hid them away for scapekeeping. The Botticelli that I just showed you, The Ideal Portrait of a Lady, the name of the lady, Simonetta Vespucci, is particularly telling owing to its remarkable journey and what it means to all of us today. And I quote from Susan Stamberg in an article that appears in npr.org. And I quote, "Nearly 5 centuries after Botticelli painted her, Simonetta got caught up in World War II. She'd been bought for the Berlin Museum collections at the end of the 19th century. In wartime, the Nazis moved her first to another part of Berlin to shield her from Allied air raids, then stored her in, believe it or not, a salt mine in central Germany. Perfect protection," the curator of the Cincinnati show commented. "Steady temperature, consistent humidity." A fascinating part of the story is the care with which the Germans treated art, those they owned as well as those that they stole. Some were put right next to the country's gold reserve. That's how valuable they felt they were worth. Simonetta, for her part, was stored in salt mines near the town of Merkers and was later discovered after the war by the victorious Allied army in a scene similar to this. That's a picture of General, later President Dwight D. Eisenhower, together with other generals of the Allied forces, inspecting the art found in the said salt mine where the Botticelli was stored for safekeeping, together with the other treasures of the Nazi regime. The COVID-19 pandemic, in my view, is as close an experience we have today to the chaos and uncertainty wrought upon our global society, much like the Second World War was decades ago. The movements of the art and collectibles market from where I stand on the auction rostrum, pointing to an increasing trend in many quarters to turn to collecting these valuable objects. This, of course, will lead many of you, I am sure, to want to make sense of this phenomenon and examine the price dynamics of art, seeing how collectible goods such as these achieved and continue to gain importance. More succinctly, what I would like to make you think of is how cultural value translates to certainty. With history on our side, seeing art and rare collectibles as alternative investment classes. A number of specialized funds, such as the Fine Art Fund, cater to high net worth individuals that want to diversify their portfolios. In 2010, for example, the Wall Street Journal reported that almost 8% of total wealth is held in so-called passion investments: art, musical instruments, wine, jewelry, antiques, cars, racehorses, etc. Of all the luxury assets, the report said, art is the most likely to be acquired for its potential appreciation in value. Allow me to impress upon you the startling reality of the appreciation of the value of Philippine art by taking a look at some concrete examples at Salcedo Auctions, starting with the phenomenon of more recent vintage. This is an image of a Justin Noida work that what we offered back in 2012. Note the year, note the style, note the size. It had an estimate of 150 to 180,000 back in 2012. In 2013, we offered a similarly sized work, colors roughly the same, the visual composition much like uh, the work offered in 2012. This particular work was offered just earlier this year. Look at the estimate of that work. It already had an estimate of 2 million to 2,400,000 pesos. Of course, as mentioned in the title of this talk, we will not just be focusing our attention to art, but also rare collectibles. Among these, of course, is fine furniture. Here is an example of a table that I'm quite excited about. This particular table was brought to us by an old Manila family who, funnily enough, had kept this in their Quezon City office and at some point was even used by their employees in the cafeteria where they would eat. And at times, in fact, the security guard would sleep on top of this table in the evening. They were already surprised when this table was brought to us, and our specialists gave an estimate starting at around 700,000 pesos. They were completely shocked when they found out that this particular table was made by artisans who were based in the early 1900s in the Bilibid prisons. Not a lot of people know that the artisans in the Bilibid prisons in the early 20th century were the same ones that provided all of the distinguished furniture that you find in Malacanang Palace. So those same artisans crafted this table that's good to sit 14. It took more than 10 men to carry this into the Peninsula Manila, where we had our auction. Imagine the shock of the owner of this table when it sold for 5.84 million, a table that they had practically forgotten, if not for the fact that they wanted to clear their office. Last example is, of course, a painting that is very close to me, as it reminds me of the time when I was director of the Ateneo Art Gallery. And I know it intimately because, of course, in addition to being charged with evaluating and appraising the works in the collection for insurance purposes, I was also had intimate knowledge of its history. Back then, this particular work was acquired for the amount of around 300 pesos. With the time that I had had it insured for the museum, it was already at 6 million pesos. And you could see the amount of appreciation that the value of this work enjoyed over time. Just look at the annual rate of return of this, and you'll know what I mean, where people start looking at art on top of their other financial instruments when it comes to, well, investing their money. Now, I'm sure most of you sitting there are scratching your heads and wondering how all this value in art is created. To be precise, what is it about art and rare collectibles, such as in this example that I showed you, that allows it to be priced at a certain level and, unlike most asset classes, moves up in value over time? It's important for us first to consider that in buying art and rare collectibles, non-monetary motives dominate financial considerations. Earlier, I quoted the use of the term passion investment. You like something so much that you want to own it. Reasons will, of course, vary as to why you would want something, but above it all is for the sheer joy and enjoyment that collecting, indeed the act of possessing, brings. It's that tingle, that spark that you feel at the end of your nerve, that excitement that fires deep inside you, that you own and possess an object. It helps, of course, that one has the means, the disposable income to sustain such a passion. The performance of art as an investment, therefore, according to Spangers in a paper titled Returns and Fundamentals in the International Art Market, largely depends on a wealthy individual's demand for luxury consumption. Accordingly, two other studies in 2009 and 2010 show how art prices are impacted by changes in equity wealth and in top incomes. Now, let me pause here for a while and say that as a passion, there is no such thing as a right or wrong art. In the same way that there is no right or wrong way to buy or collect art. To quote a US museum's director's speech to a group of art patrons such as yourselves, anyone can collect whatever they feel like collecting and buy whatever they feel like buying, wherever and whenever they feel like buying it, for whatever reason they decide to buy it, and for however much money they feel like spending on it. It is, after all, their, speaking to all of you, your money. It's your money. And you can do whatever you like with it. As a pragmatist, though, with over 2 decades of experience in the field of researching and collecting Philippine art and collectibles, and having witnessed firsthand the outstanding performance of art and rare collectibles in the auction market, where I stand, I find that my purpose here is to provide some guidelines for yourselves, for people who, like me, believe in spending their money wisely and who prefer to pay fair prices. If that happens to be you, then I believe this advice that I will be sharing with you will help you learn about how value is formed, why they are worth so much, and why they will most likely hold or increase their value over time. While I can never claim to have a crystal ball to predict the future value of art, in much the same way that no one can say with 100% accuracy what returns a stock or piece of property will bring, I believe that anyone can increase their batting average by simply remembering some essential guidelines. And of course, I start with this image of a painting that we offered several years ago, particularly memorable, and it speaks to me, and I hope to all of you, it being a painting of a painting. This is Felix Resurrección Hidalgo's famous, long lost painting entitled La Pintura. As I mentioned earlier, and I show you some details of the piece and the amount for which it sold for. As I mentioned earlier, more and more people are turning to art and collectibles to park their excess cash. People today talk about getting a real Luna, Hidalgo, Amorsolo, Manansala, or Hoya painting instead of just simply living in a 100 square meter Rockwell box named after them. Think about it. Art is a finite resource, a certain kind, and I underscore certain here, appreciates in value. Selling it is not subject to tax. So far, it hardly has any maintenance costs, save for some cleaning and perhaps a reframing every 10 years or so. And above all, it gives you sheer joy just by looking at it. All this sounds terribly exciting, but it's important to not just get caught up in the art buying bandwagon without being discerning. Education, taking the time to do research, is the key to being a successful art collector. Doing so, one should be able to answer the following questions. The first one, and I show you first, of course, this wondrous image of a Luna painting that we discovered and sold again several years ago at Salcedo. This is one Luna Innovicios Ado Valanave. And I show that in connection to this adage: the more art costs, the more respected and established the artist should be. I discovered that particular painting in a private collection in Argentina. A long lost work, indeed the first major find of an undoubted work by Luna in recent memory. Of course, most of you would be aware of the other important discovery that we made, which made national news. This one, a tremendous find that is now in the hands of one of the most significant art collections in the country, selling for that price at Salcedo. It's important to remember that collectors generally prefer art from their compatriots. In recent years, this has been particularly obvious in emerging markets such as China, India, Russia, and of course the Philippines, where the newfound wealthy are buying back their heritage. Luna and, as I had shown earlier, Hidalgo command the highest respect because they are considered to be national heroes. Recall what we learned in history books about their victory in the 1884 Madrid Salon, an achievement that is ingrained in our psyches to this day as the first real manifestation of the Filipino as being equal or better than people from other nationalities. Remember this: before Pacquiao, before Yuka Sasso, Pinoy pride was truly at play here. Whether spoken or written, what is most important to remember here is determining the reputation that an artist has. And of course, that comes from getting informed and expert opinion. The more people who recognize an artist's name And the more people who are trusted for their opinions have good things to say about an artist, the better. The more qualified the opinion makers are, and the more respected, especially they are in the arts community, the more that you should value their opinions. In all cases, you want to both hear and read about the artists that you're interested in. Do one at the expense of the other, and you can easily come away with inaccurate or skewed ideas of how significant an artist really is. The types of information that you come across during the course of your readings and listenings, no matter what artist you are learning about, includes the following facts. First, the life and career of the artist. The longer the artist has been creating and exhibiting art, so much the better. Let's take a look at this stunning work by national artist Federico Aguilar Alquaz. There is by no means a hard and fast rule, but it stands to reason that an artist like Alquaz, with accomplishments dating back over 50 years, tends to be more collectible than a 25-year-old artist who's only having his second show, if only for the fact that it's safer to see an artist who has devoted his life to art making rather than someone who could simply change his career and stop making art completely. Fortitude, commitment, and focus here are key. Just look at how much that sold for. Next thing to remember, the education and professional standing of the artist. Where, when, and with whom the artist studied, and what professional, academic, or collegial positions he or she held is another good telltale sign for an artist. In the Philippines, UP, UST in particular, have the best reputations as fine arts colleges. And a person such as national artist Jose Hoya, who was also UP Dean of the College of Fine Arts, shows him to be the kind of artist you could bank on and truly bank on. With an estimate of 8 million pesos, it sold at auction for a world record price based on size at Salcedo Auctions of over 22 million pesos. Next question that you need to keep in mind is really quite direct. Who are you and where did you come from? It's a question that we ask not just of artists, of course, but of those that give certain opinions regarding artists' work. I'd like to show this, one of my favorite artworks that we've offered at Salcedo, this painting entitled Enlightenment by national artist Vicente Manansala. What kind of exhibitions and where they were held are arguably the strongest cases that you can make regarding the importance of an artist. There's a difference between an exhibition in a commercial gallery, think fly-by-night home operations, for example, to select Makati and Quezon City-based galleries versus nonprofit art galleries, museums, or institutions where the artist has exhibited art either in one-person shows or in group shows with other artists. Discernment is very important here, as one needs to be able to distinguish importance between institutions and, of course, the expertise of its staff. Ask yourself the question, what is the background of the gallery director and those around him or her? I shudder when I think about, all of these handbag dealers, musical managers, or shysters going around as self-styled art experts and their ilk, who just after stumbling into the lucrative nature of the trade now revel in delight, fooling so many unsuspecting individuals. Please, don't be one of those. Remember, always bank on a good name. Which leads to the next caveat. In art, there is good hype and there is fake news. Be very careful when you read news about record-setting prices published here and there. Ask yourself these questions. What is the standing of the artist? Is there basis for the announced price? Are the prices announced comparable and consistent? If it's too high to be true, believe me, it is. There's a reason why a Hoya, Magsaysay Ho, or Aguinaldo can believably stay within a certain price range. No matter the passion of the collector, there is simply no way an individual who purports to have financial resources to acquire art at a certain price to allow himself or herself to overpay. In the art market, there is always a reason why a work of art is priced a certain way. There is precedent, there is antecedent. Look at price records prior to the sale and after the sale. Is there a certain consistency in the pricing? Be careful, observe, and I cannot emphasize this enough. Do not be fooled. There are many art Pied Pipers out there. Next, awards, prizes, grants, and honors. This is perhaps the most abused criterion that gallerists and PR practitioners use to generate fluff and spin. Awards, as recognition of excellence, are certainly good indicators of importance, but there is such a thing as a truly reputable and prestigious award, or one that sounds more like winning the International Basketball Sculpture Competition from some unknown town in the Himalayas. Believe me, I've seen such questionable competitions. The work that you are seeing, for example, in this case, by Ronald Veltura, is certainly not indicative of what I had showed you. He is arguably the country's most significant and most commercially successful contemporary visual artist. People forget that he is the winner of the Ateneo Art Awards, which, sorry for, mentioning it again, I established back in 2004. And if I may be so bold as to say, it's an award that continues to play an important role in conversations about art today. Ventura, alongside two other artists that year, beat 120 other artists who were nominated by leading museum directors and critics, with a jury consisting not just of local, but international art luminaries. After that win, a growing number of regional collectors have been bidding up his work, while international galleries began to represent him, among them the renowned Perutan, the same gallery that holds exhibitions at no less than the Hall of Mirrors at the Versailles. Now you tell me if you think this is prestigious or not, and by extension, if the published estimate for his works and their eventual selling price are not commensurate to the artist's stature and standing in the local art scene. Next thing to consider is the idea of collections. Who owns the artist's art? Private, public, or corporate is another important factor that determines value. The more significant the collections that own the artist's art, the more important the artist tends to be. When museums own the art, this is certainly by no means owned by a museum, but his works are certainly held by all the major museums, such as this one, by national artist Hernando R. Ocampo, H.R. Ocampo, to most of you. These works are increasingly rare and difficult to find, genuine ones at that. And that is, of course, a very good sign. Major corporate collections are generally good for an artist to be in. Private collections of those whose uh, um, artworks are of celebrated and renowned carry weight when such individuals are highly respected in the arts community, and that their pieces have been referred to in literature or perhaps even borrowed by museums, not just here, but overseas. And that's what it sold for at auction at Salcedo. There are many other factors in understanding the value and investment potential of art, such as being able to discern if an artwork is truly important, or knowing about its provenance and fair market price. The true value of a work, of course, should be viewed over a long period of time. You should find enjoyment in it, and returns should not be the primary factor. Put simply, there are no shortcut answers to the question of how one can appreciate art. It takes great commitment to be able to stand in one's own truth, let alone seek to move beyond it to be able to see beauty, not only in terms of aesthetics, but also in terms of concepts and theories that find pleasure even in the most brooding images, or even the most disturbing form and ideal.
Is it too late to let me know? I'll try.
Hmm. Can you still hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can
Thank
hear
you.
you.
So this is what it sold for at Salcedo. Next slide is, remember when I said earlier about the joy that art brings? One should never buy art simply for the sake of making money. If you like something, buy it because you will have to live with it. If you try to sell it later on, your chances of success are multiplied because of the possibility that other people will like it as well. Much like this gorgeous piece by Mauro Malang Santos, which had an estimate of 3.8 to 5 million and sold at nearly 10 million pesos at auction. That being said, I also try not to get too romantic about the whole notion of passion and following one's own bliss. Que sera sera, as they say. While the Latin saying de gustibus non est disputandum, when it comes to taste, there can be no argument, still rings true, letting one's whims run amok is just plain decadent and wasteful. I think that it is more tasteful to be prudent, to narrow the field, and find beauty in the works of what informed opinion would consider as the more important among our group of Filipino visual artists. As an Filipino art critic and researcher once wrote, at some point, you must face reality and cash in. Unless you plan to open a private art museum like Dr. Kwanang, profit is only realized when you sell. The best is to sell, much like the people who have entrusted their valuables to us at Salcedo, at the height of an artist's popularity. Some may wish to set a time frame, say retirement. The problem with waiting too long is that by then it might be too late for you to correct your art and rare collectibles portfolio. In any case, and I quote the art researcher again, it's a good idea not to hold on to everything till the day you pass on. Because if you won't sell those art and rare collectibles and enjoy your hard earned money, your heirs will. If done properly, investing in Philippine art and rare collectibles can reap profit over the short term or even constitute a retirement fund over the long term. Even the most artistically challenged financial consultant will have to admit that there is no point in wallpapering your office walls with PLDT or Ayala Land shares or Swiss banknotes. I personally would prefer to see the fruits of my labors in my living room rather than checking my account balance every month. In this time of pandemic, I believe that all of us here are striving to maintain truly well-appointed lives surrounded by art and objects of beauty that provide joy and peace of mind, one that comes from ideas of aesthetic beauty, that feeling of stability and security, knowing the cultural and financial value of the objects that we collect and surround ourselves with. There is indeed much to be thankful for in having the power to chart our destinies and celebrate the worlds we create. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lerma, for that very informative, insightful, and introspective presentation.
Thank you,
Uh,
Lloyd.
we will now go to the Q&A. And as I mentioned earlier, please submit your questions through the Q&A box. All right, so we have the first question from the box. Are reprints of well-known artists worth investing in?
The first thing that we need to be mindful of is the size of the edition of these reprints. Whether they're a production or not, we also need to be able to answer the question whether these are authorized by the artists whose images they represent. So to answer the question, yes, there is value as long as we can establish that there is a finite number of works that are available. The less copies there are, the more valuable it is. Thank you.
Okay, so and here's another question for you, Richie. I have some artworks that seem to have gathered dusts and maybe mold. What do I do? Where or who can check on them?
We'll bring them to Salcedo Auctions so that we can assess the kind of work that needs to be done. We would, of course, be referring you to trusted art conservators and restorers. These are people that we have worked with or whom I may have worked with when I was working at the museum. So it's very important that you have trusted professionals, trusted trained professionals that would be able to clean or restore your artworks. So bring them to us.
All right, so you know where that is, Salcedo Auctions. Okay, another question. What is your view on the future value of indigenous tribal art?
Ever since we started offering indigenous and tribal art at Salcedo Auctions, what was very surprising in the beginning was that it was mostly collectors from overseas that appreciated our tribal and ethnographic art pieces more than us. The beauty of the auctions and the way that we've presented them and widened the market was that we were able to expand the audience for tribal and ethnographic art, as well as to expand its appreciation. So to answer that question, I see great potential in collecting Philippine tribal and ethnographic art. We, of course, rely on the expertise of our specialists in order to determine which pieces are truly important and which pieces are, well, products for the tourist trade. And there is also a lot of that. So there is the expertise there that is able to identify, the telltale signs, what are true antiquities and what are not. And judging from the results at our auctions, there is certainly a lot of growth and still a lot of room for growth for tribal and ethnographic art pieces. Thank
Okay.
you.
Maybe this is a rejoinder to a question earlier. Will Salcedo Auctions be able to give us a value of our art piece and help us sell?
Yes, we would be delighted to assist. Um, I hope that you don't mind the plug once again. Please contact us via info@salcedoauctions.com or give us a call. All of our contact details are on our website. We would be very happy to give you an auction estimate without obligations, and that one is free of charge as well. So we can give you an idea of the value of your art collection. And if you'd like to consider offering it at auction, we'd be more than happy to assist and give you good advice.
Okay. Another one, Richie. How do you go about authenticating an artwork?
Thank you for asking that, because that's something that we come across very often. Um, I'd like to advise everybody that when it comes to certificates of authenticity, not every piece of paper that you see holds as much water or as much value as the other. At Salcedo Auctions, there are certificates of authenticity that we greatly honor, and those that we feel deserve further reckoning, so to speak. So again, if you bring the artwork to us, we would be able to determine who we believe would be in the best position to authenticate a work of art and whose opinion we trust. Sometimes I'll have to inform you again, some pieces that come with certificates of authenticity end up not being authentic. I must tell you that, because there are a lot of people that have been fooled, and I feel so badly every time I'm invited into people's home and people show me proudly the works that they've spent their hard-earned money on. And of course, only if I'm asked will I provide my opinion. But many times I've had to simply keep myself, quiet. I don't want to give unsolicited advice, but I've seen many, many homes that have works which are clearly not by the artists that they purport to be. And even if they come with all of these certificates of authenticity, unfortunately, they're not by reliable sources. And these are not people that are qualified to be authenticating those works too. So please come to us and we'd be more than happy to provide guidance.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
What is your advice to millennials who want to get started in art collecting but have limited resources to start with? The work of the established artists would already be beyond their financial reach.
That's a very good question as well, and I love that question in light of the 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 auction that we have coming up this Saturday. The Gavilan Block interior sale. Um, what we provide through this other auction platform, it's a subsidiary brand of Salcedo Auctions, is that we provide an entry point for beginning collectors to take a look at art that we feel has potential to grow over time. Um, what I would advise, of course, is to take a look still at the offerings provided at Gavilan Block. Still ask yourself the question, is it something that I like? Is it something that I can live with? Try to go through the various criterion that I presented earlier. Not all works by the established artists are necessarily expensive. I have had works by Fernando Tobel or by Fernando Amorsolo, by Manansala that don't necessarily cost more than 50,000 pesos. Even if they're original fine prints, they are still in a limited edition and hold and increase their value over time. Let this be a word of assurance to our young and emerging collectors as well. I still remember the time when I was encouraging some burgeoning collectors to purchase some prints by Manansala. These were giclée prints that were produced with the permission of the estate of Vicente Manansala and the Friends of Manansala. At that time, they were only costing 25,000 pesos. And this was back in 2013 and 2014. You know, and they were only an edition of 25,000 pesos, an edition of 25. In fact, you'll see some of these usually clay prints. If you, for some of you who live in Ritz Towers, for example, you'll see it there. Eminently collected. It came to auction 2 years ago or something. That work that was purchased for 25,000 pesos, something that most of our, listeners or viewers today would be certainly able to afford. It's sold for over 200,000 pesos already. So it's a good starting point. Always still look at the big names. They don't necessarily need to be expensive. Look at those to start with and then build up. The other one is, of course, yes, certainly look at the works of the younger artists, but please follow the advice that I make regarding contemporary art. A lot of that is how should we say, they're all just starting out as well. Ask yourself the question, does this artist look like he or she is going to be doing this over a long period of time? Why? If they stop creating works, you can kiss goodbye to the money. I mean, it's wonderful seeing it on your wall, but in terms of value, well, it's simply left at that. So you have to ask yourself the questions. Who is selling it? Where is it being sold? Is it looking much like everybody else's? Is it something that copies the work of a more senior artist? For example, swim through the hype when it comes to the younger artist's work so that you don't stumble and make a mistake. Of course, we're more than happy to give advice. You can contact us, come to the preview or contact us separately, and we'd be more than happy to provide you that advice.
Is Salcedo Auction streamed online or do we need to go there physically?
If you'd like to be able to see the preview of the forthcoming auction, you can view the preview through our online virtual gallery, because I understand, of course, people are still quite hesitant about stepping outside given everything that's going on, and we certainly and which is why we've set up the virtual gallery. But for those that are already happy to step out, we have the physical space at Next Tower, 6786 Ayala Avenue, where we have a dedicated space with free parking for everyone as well, where you can come and enjoy yourselves in a socially distanced manner and look at all of the works. To participate in the auctions, we have you can participate online, much like what we will be doing this Saturday, and you can register online and bid online as well. And we also have auctions that are combined online and physical, much as like what we will be doing when we have our major sale in September.
As per Salcedo's experience, now that we have the pandemic, was there a growth in people recently selling valuable art from their private collection or more buying valuable art?
There has been an uptick. This is something that we were quite surprised by, and of course, delighted about as a business. We didn't certainly expect it, but I think we were very thankful to have made that. It's that oft used already and almost hackneyed term, pivoting over the course of the pandemic. But we were very happy to have been able to shift our to digital operations. Um, Surprisingly, and I think I mentioned this earlier, I think because of the fact that a lot of us have been staying indoors, more people have been selling more things simply because they have the time to look at what they have and start to, I suppose, assess whether or not what they have around them is something that they want to keep or something that they want to dispose of. Also, of course, given the everything that's going on with the pandemic, and that's how that's affecting our lives, we're having, of course, to reassess the the wisdom of keeping so many things. Two, if perhaps we feel that our resources are better placed by unloading these pieces such that we can liquidate them, that is certainly what is happening right now. At the same time, of course, we have a lot of people, and certainly our members of the Management Association of the Philippines, a lot of us are in that same boat, where this range of things that we can, well, spend on has actually become limited. There's, much less travel going on nowadays, and that certainly frees up a lot of liquidity, which we are seeing being spent on art. We are now having more auctions than we did pre-pandemic. Whereas before we would have 6 to 8 auctions a year, now we have one every month, in addition to all of the art exhibitions that our subsidiary brand, Salcedo Private View, is mounting at the same time. More often than not, even these art exhibitions are selling out. And so we're quite excited by this, and it's just it's a delight to see how everybody is looking at art. Well, as mentioned, as a place whereby we can, one, um, how should we say, unlock value in terms of the things that we possess. And the other end is, of course, where we can place and grow value in terms of the pieces that we acquire.
Okay, here's one question. How about those plates with the artist work in them? Are they
Yeah,
valuable?
they are growing to be, even all of those. Um, all of these, these art plates produced by, alumni associations, etc. Support them, support those charities, etc. Because you know what, you're not just helping people. Over time, remember that these memorabilia are produced in a finite number. Quite a number of them are in fact numbered if you look at the back of the plates. Therefore, they're done in limited editions, and so over time these become valuable. Something to also remember and to connect to the plates and to connect to the fine art prints, for example, that were the questions earlier. Something to keep in mind as well. Don't just think of it as, okay, there were 100 made, so there are 100 of them out there. You don't really know how many actually have survived over time. The artist may have produced 100 prints, for example, but who knows how many out of that 100 made it out of the bodega, or wasn't destroyed in a flood, or wasn't torn by the cat, that sort of thing. In the same way, if something was not even numbered, etc., you will see over time how much of a similar piece comes out at auction, for example, which leads you to an idea regarding its value. Case in point, if, for example, an unnumbered edition comes to market, it starts out at a higher price. The more often it comes out at auction, people get a sense that, oh, there are probably more out there, and that affects value. But that's certainly how the market is built. That over time, of course, if there's more supply of that particular work, that particular piece, etc., that will affect price.
And here's one more. Are antique ceramics found in the Philippines worth investing? My mother had many. Do these appreciate?
We have to look at it in terms of, at least from our view at Salcedo Auctions, they have appreciated over time, but certainly not along the lines of, uh, Chinese imperial ware, for example. We have some people who bring in all of these, finds from native digs, for example. Yes, they are valuable, but again, we have to look at it in terms of the sheer quantity of these, plates, ceramics, and where and they're being found, etc., where they're being sold, the rarity of it is the question that one needs to keep in mind of in terms of its value. From what we're seeing at Salcedo Auctions, they haven't really grown that much in value. One, because of their sheer preponderance. And number two, and this is something that we hope can be corrected over time as well. As scholarship grows and as more expertise grows as well, I'm hoping that people become more discerning when it comes to, let's say, genuine vessels, objects that are found in real, let's say sunken treasure, vis-a-vis things that are just recently made. Unfortunately, unlike with the visual arts, where there is a larger group of people with that expertise to be able to tell the difference between, let's say, when they see a malang, they see a nuida, they see a hoya, they see a banansala, bencab, etc. They can tell right away. And by that growth, or by that sheer number of people that can tell or determine, value grows because there's that shared knowledge. Whereas when it comes to a lot of these locally found ceramics, etc., when you don't have a lot of people that understand where value is coming from, you can't expect value to arise because nobody really understands where the value is sourced.
Okay. You're besieged with lots of questions.
I love it.
Another one. Are the art pieces in the art gallery of the malls worth looking into? Does it appreciate in value?
Again, not all galleries are the same. Ask yourself the question, who is behind the art gallery? What is the background of the gallerist? Why is that important? Because that helps to determine what kind of eye the gallerist has in terms of the kinds of art that is being presented. Have a look at the CV of the artist being offered. Just because they won this or that award, as I mentioned, and they often do that, a lot of student art awards, etc. Like I said, not all art awards are equal. You have to look beyond that as well. One very, very important thing for everybody to please remember when you go to these galleries is if it reminds you of looking like something that was done previously by somebody else, stay away. Because that's not something that will be valuable over time. Unfortunately, the way that the market is, and especially in light of, well, sadly, the Philippines being a third world market, etc., people like to go for the sure thing. And for a lot of our young visual artists out there, instead of being true to themselves and painting things that are unique, unfortunately, they waste their talents by copying what other people make or do variations of these simply because they think that it's going to sell. There might be some people that are fooled, or there might be some people that might be looking for cheaper options. It looks like this, it looks like that, etc. And it will do. You, as an art collector, are doing a disservice to the artist by pandering to that um, sheer necessity of creation. But at the same time, you're also doing a disservice to yourself and to your hard-earned money if you're going to throw your money away. So please don't throw away your money.
Okay. Here's a more specific question. What is the value of a Manuel Rodriguez painting? It is about 4 by 5 feet in size.
It depends if it's a Manuel Rodriguez Sr. or a Manuel Rodriguez Jr. And we'd certainly be happy to take a look at that as well. Both are valuable, but of course, Sr. is, simply by his place in Philippine art history, the rarity of his works, where his artworks are exhibited, etc., they would certainly be more valuable. We've offered works of both Rodriguez father and Rodriguez son at auction. We'd be able to tell just by simply looking at it too. So drop us a line and we'd be happy to give you advice regarding value. But in general, senior is more valuable than junior. But you also need to, and it wasn't specified as well, what is the medium? Manuel Rodriguez Sr. is considered to be the father of modern Philippine printmaking. So are we talking about a print? Are we talking about a painting? So that's something else that we also need to take a look at. Drop us a line and be happy to advise.
How many solo exhibitions does a living artist need to accomplish prior to being eligible for auction sale?
Okay, when it comes to bringing a work to auction, okay, the only criterion, at least as far as Salcedo Auctions is concerned, when it comes to works is if it fits a particular sale category. For example, if we're talking about important Philippine art, which is the pinnacle of the various um, auction categories that we have at Salcedo Auctions, they need to fulfill certain criterion about cultural importance. Of course, the market in this particular case, the auction house is not a museum. So we're not just offering works, pardon me, we're not just offering the works of those that are national artists in the important Philippine art sale. We're also offering the works of significant contemporary visual artists who've made inroads internationally, whether these are solo exhibitions or group exhibitions. They need to be respectable museums, they need to be respectable curators as well. So to answer that question, there is no particular number. You know, that you might have artists who might have had just appeared in group exhibitions rather than solo exhibitions, but in no way does that diminish their value. If they don't necessarily fit into the important Philippine art category, then they can be included in other categories, connoisseur sales, the interior sales at Gavel and Block, etc. We try to avoid, though, and as much as possible, and this is out of respect for our commercial art galleries out there, we try not to take direct consignments from visual artists. Why is that? The auction, I still believe, is not the place where reputations are made. We are simply the place where reputations are cemented as far as we're concerned, and that's why it's very, very important to us at Salcedo Auctions. And that's why we're very mindful and very protective of the way in which auctions are conducted. We're such sticklers for process. We're such sticklers for ethical behavior when it comes to art, is that we don't want the platform of auctions to be abused. We know that the power of the auction platform, but we also want to make sure that it's not used or abused for other purposes. So once again, the auction venue is not a place to create reputations. You cannot just simply be well known just because you're selling high prices. Prices, as I mentioned, can be manufactured. You can just simply, and I'd like to mention this again, and if you could just beg my indulgence, something that I'd like to I think this is very important advice for all of our viewers out there. There is a way for people, for even for collectors, to control the value of a work of art. They can simply just assemble a group of people to always bid up a work. And you might fall into the trap of believing those prices time and time again. That's very difficult. So you need to be mindful of that fact. And this is also the reason why we avoid getting consignments directly from visual artists. Why? Because that is open to, sad to say, manipulation. We don't like to be the setting for manipulation. You don't want an artist to tell his collectors, come on, bid it up, so that the value of your work also goes up over time. You don't want to fall into the trap and get fooled, please. So as much as possible, we do not like having to take direct consignments from visual artists. Maybe the only time we do that is, let's say, okay, it's for charity. Charity is different. They're gifting an artwork to raise funds, let's say, for in the case of this Saturday's auction for Hands-on Manila, etc. Of course, you know, we have to honor the generosity of the artists. And of course, if they're donating a work, we welcome that with open arms. But sorry to sort of like go on and on about it, but I'd like to think that I touched on a lot of very important points there in terms of what to look out for.
Okay. Are NFTs or non-fungible tokens in the pipeline for your auction?
It's too early for us to say that it's not. The way that the international auction houses are moving, it seems that it is going to happen at some stage. But there are many different factors that are dependent on that. One is, of course, well, for one, in terms of Salcedo Auctions and the Philippine art market, NFTs, etc., are only beginning to to emerge. So, in terms of an auction market per se, uh, we'd probably be the first ones to even try it if we do. But the only time that we will actually delve into that is if we see that there is, how should we say, credible art that's being done utilizing that particular medium. I still am a traditionalist in terms of, you know, what I consider to be art. I don't simply look at, you know, bits and bits and squiggles on the screen, etc., and code and see that as art. I see that, you know, there is certainly something to be said about concept. There's certainly something to say about, you know, the electronic arts, etc., you know, art installations and that sort of thing. At the end of the day, I still would like to see it as, if it comes out at Salcedo Auctions, I need to see it as art. I need to see it as something that speaks to the audience that I speak to, rather just simply presenting an investment vehicle. Because other than that, what would differentiate me from selling Bitcoins or Dogecoins or that sort of thing? And we don't know where that's really going to go. Ups and downs, etc. I really don't want to be a party to that. And I really wouldn't like to be the vehicle whereby people will meet their financial ruin as well. I'm really more prudent in that sense.
Okay. What about sculptures? Are tabletop sculptures or statue worth investing in?
Oh yes, certainly. Um, I think that um, as far as sculptures, tabletop sculptures, etc., whether these are editions, whether these are single objects, etc., um, they are certainly worth collecting, and we've seen that uh, over time as well. So yes, as long as these are by reputable visual artists, we'd certainly uh, be able to come in. Sorry, I've just been trying to rack my brains about because I was asked that question regarding NFTs, and if I may just read the quote that I gave regarding the question of NFTs, just to be sure that I'm sticking to what I said. I said regarding NFT, sorry to bring it back, the Philippines is still a developing art market, and we really are truly behind international markets when it comes to that. Once the Philippine market is developed to that point, really, and I guess to connect it to that, and I think I answered that questions, that's when we will delve into NFTs. So that I suppose answers the NFT question and hopefully the sculpture question as well.
Okay. In relation to awards and exhibitions, is there a governing body or organization in the Philippines that determines the prestige or legitimacy of exhibitors or award-giving bodies?
We all know, for example, that the organizations of state and the national, well, basically the honors of state are, of course, the ones that take preeminence. So, of course, the National Artist Award, you know, at being a award given by peers, and the rigorousness that involved in that is recognized. Of course, the CCP 13 Artists Award is also something that must be uh, is certainly highly recognized as well. Those that have had a long history too. And again, pardon my mentioning it, and especially, and this is an unbiased opinion, but I think I'd be more free to say it now that I'm not involved anymore. But the Ateneo Art Awards, for example, which I started in 2004, and which I'm happy that my successors at the gallery and that other, the entire Philippine art scene has taken to heart and embraced. And it's become essentially like the Turner Prize the UK's, the Philippines version of the UK's Turner Prize is really the Ateneo Art Awards. And to see how that's grown as well is, so that's something that I think people certainly respect. Art awards that are also having a long history, also, those run by certain brands that we can mention, outside of this forum, are also, of course, very respected. So there are the certain criterion. So in answer to the ones that connected to certain brands, those that have a long history, for example, and a distinguished set of winners as well. Why is it important? Because it, when you see previous winners and where they are today, it only goes to show that the criterion used, that the caliber of the judges is of the type that produces artists that become significant and valuable over time.
Okay. Um, uh, some people say that auctions can be used as a channel for money laundering.
Mhm.
Can you comment?
I'd be happy to comment on that because it's very important for Salcedo Auctions to emphasize the fact that we understand and truly respect the position that we find ourselves in, the large amounts of money that are involved, etc. So how we see Salcedo Auctions, it's almost like a financial institutions. The importance of um, knowing your clients is very important. And this is why we've instituted so many checks and balances in terms of from the time people register to bid and are accepted to be bidding at Salcedo Auctions. We try to see, already where do people come from in terms of, where they're, where is this money coming from, where is it going, etc. We don't, we don't want to be a party to any of these. And this is why we've striven to always be above board in our dealings and always strive to be very ethical and professional in all of our dealings. If a lot of people, some of you might notice, for example, that Salcedo, when it comes, for example, even when it comes to participating in our online auctions, there are certainly more steps that are involved. Some might say we put some barriers in terms of participating, but that's only out of concern for everyone in terms of making sure that we want to protect not just our sellers, in terms of being able to make sure that we have legitimate buyers, but also our buyers to not be caught, in within an ambit that might be questioned later on. And that's why we have all of these controls that are in place to check who is bidding, etc. One other very important thing to note, and this is something that we're very proud of, is the online auction platform. Salcedo Auctions has its own dedicated online auction platform whereby we are able to go through the information that's provided to us, sift through that information, and protect that information because that particular online bidding system belongs to us. So you know where your information is going. It's not going to any third party provider, but it's going to us, a name that we hope that, you know, you will continue to trust.
And here's another question, maybe from a banker. Is Salcedo Auctions already a covered institution by the BSP?
No, but well, we're not. well, I suppose a financial institution in the sense like, the different, what do you call this, licenses, like, let's say pawn shops, etc., would get. Believe it or not, when Salcedo Auctions was established 10 years ago as the first full service auction house in the country, I still remember when we were registering with SEC, nobody knew what an auction house was. They didn't know how to classify us even. So as we grow, and as more and more people see us as really, in a way, a financial, well, a semi-financial institution, if you want to call it that way, I'm really all for, I've been a great advocate for governance, as well as, making sure that the controls are there, because without certain laws or, how should we say, guiding principles that are in place, it could be open to manipulation. It could be open to all of these things, money laundering, as mentioned, etc. And I'm not shy to mention that because, I don't shy away from it because I'm a realist and I know that's what people are thinking. What I've always been advocating for is to make sure that the mechanisms are there to prevent that from happening so that we continue to be a trusted venue for the acquisition and the sale of art and other rare collectibles. I'm very proud to mention, though, that because we've been above board in all of our dealings, we are, as far as I know, the only art entity that is certified by um, institutions of state to participate in certain, how should we say, appraisals, uh, many different services to the government in terms of appraising its collections, etc. Simply because we've really made sure that we keep everything above board.
Yes, we have 8 minutes to go and only 2 questions left. These
All
are
right.
very specific questions. Do you consider the works of Edsel Moscoso collectible and investment grade?
Um, Edsel Moscoso is certainly a respected visual artist, and his works have come out in the important Philippine art sale. My response to that would be, please continue to join our auctions so that you can see the price movement of the works of Edsel Moscoso. So if the fact that his works are included in the auctions is already a tick, I think. Now, in terms of the investment worthiness of Moscoso, again, ask yourself all those questions, which I was happy to share with the MAP that might serve as some sort of guide. Questions that you would ask in regards to the artist. Follow the movement of the art. I bring it back to the question of, when I show, the work of Justin Noida, imagine from 150,000. Who would have thought? Imagine the people that were buying it at 150,000. Same size, around similar year later on, they're around the 2.2 million mark. The people that were very fortunate to have been acquiring, Noidas at that time were because they saw that here was, at that time, an underrated modernist who was doing unique and singular work, which artistic circles would come to see as valuable. And over time, consistently, they have been selling at those levels. So it just simply took that spark and, that price growth. So again, if you ask me, we were including his works early on in important Philippine art, even before his price shot up. So that's where I'd like to think that, again, pardon the plug, I'd like to think that we have the eye to say, this artist is worth his metal, buy him. Because I think that, over time, as we come to recognize his work some more, the rest of the art collecting community will see the wisdom in it. I'm very proud of the fact that as far as the art market is concerned, for example, the artist Alfonso Osorio was largely big. I mean, the market of Osorio was built by Salcedo Auctions. Nobody had heard of Osorio until we put him on the cover of our catalog. After that, all the Johnny Come Lately start offering Alfonso Osorio, but we were the first ones to put him on our cover. A lot of people never heard of Osorio. It took Salcedo Auctions to be the one to say, did you know that he was, like one of the contemporaries of Jackson Pollock, and his works are in the Guggenheim, his works are in MoMA, etc. Nobody else said that as far as the Philippine art market except for us. Lo and behold, so it takes that kind of, knowledge. It takes that kind of, let's say, foresight. And I'd like to, so that's why I'd like to continue to follow where the market goes at Salcedo, to see where certain artists are going to move.
Okay, I think the other questions that are left for us are very specific, so I suggest that the owners of the questions just get in touch with Salcedo Auctions.
Yes,
So,
feel free to contact us.
yes, thank you very much, Mr. Richie LERMA, for sharing your time and expertise with us in the MAP. We would like to see you all on the August 18 MAP Arts and Culture Series on heritage and ancestral homes. So thank you for joining us. Good night and keep well.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Marife. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Richie.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold. Thanks, Richie.
Thank you again, Marife. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thanks, everyone. Have a good day or whatever's left of it.
Thank you.